spent the last several weeks talking about belly fat, but some people really struggle with what the scales say or the image that they see in the mirror. So today I invited Lisa Michelle, who is an exercise physiologist and a health and fitness coach, as well as a Bible teacher and founder of FITT by Design, to come on the podcast and talk about her history with an eating disorder and how to reframe your mindset when it comes to body image from a biblical perspective. Stay tuned for this very encouraging conversation. I'm Dr. Vickie Petz Casper. I practiced obstetrics and gynecology for 20 years until I landed on the other side of the sheets as a very sick patient. When my own body betrayed me, I took a handful of pills to manage my disease and another handful to counteract the side effects. My health was out of control. Through surgery, medications, and lots of prayers, I regained my strength only to face another diagnosis. My doctor challenged me to make radical changes through lifestyle medicine. Now I feel great and I want to help you make changes that make a difference. Healthy Looks Great on You podcast takes you to many medical schools so you can learn the power of lifestyle medicine. If you're ready to take control of your health, you're in the right place. Whether you're focused on prevention or you're trying to manage a condition, I'll give you practical steps to start your own journey toward better health, because healthy looks great on you. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Lisa.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Vickie. I'm
I just thought it was a perfect time to have you on because I have spent about a month talking about belly fat. And I look at it from a health perspective because visceral fat literally doubles your risk for premature death. So it's a big deal. But I think sometimes for people who are prone to, it can get into some unhealthy issues about worrying about your waistline for the wrong reasons. So
mm,
I'd just like for you to talk a little bit about your relationship with body image and some advice that you might have for our listeners.
yeah, I mean, it is a sticky balance. I feel like it's a tightrope walk to walk that line of having to achieve certain goals for our health, because like you said, it is a big deal. And belly fat is not only a big deal, but it's also very prevalent in our culture right now. And so it's a tightrope walk of not sitting and wallowing in the shame. One of my favorite things to say, and I actually stole this from John Acuff, you can choose shame or you can choose strategy. And I love that. And it's just a short, quick, punchy reminder with alliteration that we can say over and over in our brain. You can choose shame or you can choose strategy, because I really feel like at the end of the day, that is a lot of the core issue, because we all have these swirly thoughts up here. It's a thought battle so many times. And so, yes, do we want to take care of it because this is the one and only body that we're living out our purpose and doing the things in? Yes, but then we don't want to wallow in that shame and frame the reasoning in the wrong way.
And that's interesting because you'd mentioned culture. And I think
Mm,
in our culture, there's been almost an overacceptance of an unhealthy body weight. And again, I don't think there should be one bit of shame. And healthy comes in all sizes. You can
absolutely.
be bigger and be healthy, and you can be skinny as a rail and be unhealthy.
Uh, yes.
But how do you improve your body confidence without focusing on what the scale says?
Mm. Yeah, again, another tightrope walk, right? Because I had to throw my scales away. And I think that that's a personal preference, but I don't keep them in my house because there's an ebb and flow. And I laughed the other day because I can't remember where I was. I travel, a lot for what I do, and I was somewhere, and I said, I'm 7 pounds lighter this evening than I was this morning. I would never know that because I don't ever weigh myself. And I was laughing because I was using their scale to weigh my luggage. And at the same time, I was like, oh, well, I had to weigh myself in order to pick up my luggage. And then later, I was doing the same thing. And I said, wow, interesting. I weigh 7 pounds less this evening than I did this morning, or whatever it was. And it was like middle of the day. But that is normal. And that's one of the things we need to normalize that. Yeah. Um, I think the first step, I have kind of an R alliteration for this, and I think the first step is recognizing the root. So I'm always going to go back to the fact that we need to expose the distorted thinking at the root that causes it and the identity issue. But if you're familiar with the Atomic Habits guy, James Clear, his work, and he talks about this concept of you do what you do because of what you think of you. And it's so
Mm.
true. And actually, there's this old sales concept, and it says you can boil everything down to two motivations. The reason why anyone does anything is either fear of loss or desire for gain. That's it. And so, if you think about those two things, that and that's a big statement, but if you sit with it, you'll realize like almost everything you can take down to those two things. And so then we'll realize that it's really what we think about ourselves, the dialogue that we've internalized from culture that we were just talking about. There's so much information, and so much of it is conflicting. And thank God for a podcast like yours that brings us to truth. And so recognizing that root, and then I say reclaiming the lens. And so we need to exchange the lies for truth. So that brings us into this alignment process of aligning ourselves with the truth. Reset your mind would be the next one. And that's, this practice of repetition. I mean, that's how we learned in school, right? We have to repeat the truth in order to combat the cultural lies that we're bombarded with, quite frankly. If we think about the way that we scroll, and then the next star is going to be rebuilding our temple. And that's what the Bible talks about, our body as a temple. So moving from, again, that shame into strategy, or shame into stewardship, if you want to frame it in the Christian lens. And then finally releasing that mission. And so there's only so much that we can control. There has to be a trust aspect as well. And I think that diet culture, there's is so much about control, and we need to err towards the opposite of trust. Like, God designed our body amazingly, and we need to trust it.
That's so good. And I'm glad you brought up service, because I do think that if we don't care for our temple and we don't manage our health, then we're not going to be able to take care of other people and do the
Mm,
things we're called to do. Other people are going to be taking care of us. And I think that's a great motivator for people to make some habit changes, which are not
mm,
easy. They're not easy at all. In fact, I've got a workshop that's a 7-day kickstart that really dives in and gives people practical tools on how to change a habit, because most people try and fail, try and fail, try and fail, try and fail, and then they try and give up. And the reality is that you have to keep trying, and you
mm,
just need more tools. And sometimes you do just need to reframe, reset, and let go of the idea that your body image defines your self-worth.
mm, Yes, so good, so good. And what you described, we used to talk about that as the yo-yo, right? We had a name for it, the yo-yo diet. Yeah. So
I forgot about that term, but it's
it is.
defeating with anything that you try to do, even if it's, I'm going to be more organized, or I'm going to accomplish XYZ. And then when you've tried several times and you don't, then it is easy to give up. But when we give
Mm,
up on our health, that's life. I mean,
yeah,
it really is life.
just,
And you
yeah.
described it as a tightrope, and I like that, because we can't focus on, oh, how do I look in this dress? And it's about me, me, me. What is the mirror telling me?
Mm.
But yet, if you let it go, then there are some serious consequences for that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I now help caregive for my mom, and we had this scary, traumatic experience when she was just in the hospital, and that's what I'm witnessing, and seeing that, this contrast of like, I'm caring for her. Had she have cared better for her body, and she wouldn't mind me saying that, then I wouldn't be caring for her. So it's true. It's like, we have to have this forward thinking. One of my teenagers the other day was poking some kind of fun about how healthy I eat, and they're enjoying everything and how expensive my healthy food is. And I said, well, I could pay the triple price that you're talking about for my healthy food now, or I could pay for my medical bills later. So, but it's that forward thinking, and like, what do you want your life to look like down the road? I mean, we really have to go there and think about like you said, do I want to be dependent on someone? No. Our independence, just like it starts in our teenage years and wanting that independence, it doesn't change. And when we're older, we don't want to revert back to that.
Yeah. And so many times I think people, when it comes to health, that is such a vague concept. When I teach my course, I teach to have a specific destination in mind. And
That's
then
good.
you map out the steps to get there because so many times we're like, well, I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to do all the things that I need to do. But what does that really look like? Do you want to get
Hmm.
off your blood pressure medicine? Do you want to be able to run in the yard and play with your grandkids? Like, you have to tap into your why and you have to have some specific steps. But if you don't know your destination, then you're just going to kind of drift around. I think I see that more than anything else in the health and wellness culture. And that's why I think people grasp onto every little thing that comes by. There's always a
Mm.
bandwagon, and everybody jumps on because they're looking for the next quick fix, which
Yes.
never works.
No, it never works. Well, and that, so what you just said makes me think of one of my favorite quotes, and many people have heard this, but if you aim at nothing, you're going to hit it with amazing accuracy, of course. But, and it's interesting, like you said, we really don't have a practice as a culture of making these longer term goals for our health because I hate to say it, but the diet industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is not in your favor. It does not work for your body, and they are going to keep throwing those quick fixes at you. And we're emotional creatures. And it's like we're trying to deny that and hope that we respond well in the moment. But really, successful thinking is we pre decide, like you're saying, where are we going on this journey? What is my why? Let me pre decide. Like, I love the 80-20 rule. I want to have this 20% flexibility. And I don't, stop me if this goes against any of your teaching, but I want to have this 20% flexibility so I can just like live my life. If I get invited somewhere, I don't want to insult the host or whatever it is. Just be able to live my life. But that 80% of the time, I've pre decided like I'm going to live within these healthy parameters. Does that make sense?
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's something I've really been embracing lately. Because when I talk about that try and fail, I'm kind of talking about me. And I can
Sure.
go all in because that's my personality. But I live in the real world and
Mm,
everybody else is not all in. And so you have to put in some special parameters, some special accommodations. You have to be the one that says, oh, I'm this or that, and just for example, I'm going on a trip this week and they asked us if we had any dietary restrictions. And I said, I will go with the flow
yes.
because am I plant based? Yes. Does plant based mean that I'm not going to ever put a piece of meat in my mouth? No. I don't eat processed foods, but if someone serves me oatmeal and it's got some sugar in it, I'm not going to be the one that goes, oh, I can't, because I don't. Now, if I had a health issue that I had to, that would be one thing.
Yeah. Well,
But
exactly. Right.
otherwise, I live in the real world, and I think 80-20 is a great goal. I had a guest on my show that deals with people who have autoimmune diseases, and they gotta go 100% to see the cure. They
Sure.
do,
Right. Yes.
but
There's
that's
always
not
exceptions.
what we're talking about. If we're just talking about belly fat, the problem is if you go a lot like I do, then you have to
Yeah.
reimagine what that looks like.
Mhm. Well, and that's so true. I know, but I travel a lot for what I do, and so it becomes unrealistic. And that rigidity. And again, I'm the quote queen, and but I heard leaders will be as flexible as a rubber band. Well, in health, a lot of times we're waiting on a rescue or waiting for that quick fix. Like nobody's coming. Nobody is coming. The hard reality is nobody is coming, and this is the body that you have been given for the rest of your life, and we have to lead ourselves to health. So therefore everyone's a leader to some degree, and especially for your health, for yourself and your health. And you have to have some flexibility in there to live in this world, right?
Absolutely. Well, tell everybody a little bit about what you do and what you offer and
Okay.
where they can find you.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm Lisa Michelle Jones. I am founder of Fit by Design, which is a total wellness, holistic health brand, and also a podcast where I help women find where they fit, but more specifically to get fit for their purpose, because to me it's a bigger purpose, and not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I'm an exercise physiologist by trade and a health and strength coach, a Bible teacher, author, but again, my work is completely rooted in that the way that we're designed on purpose for a purpose. And I feel like we're constantly working against a culture that is opposite of that. And if I may quote scripture, Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And so then you will know God's good and perfect will for your life. And so I feel like a lot of this topic that we're talking about, Vickie, and body image, it's about a culture that was wanting us to conform to its ways. But the truth is that we were designed for a specific purpose, and finding that purpose and then aligning it, in a healthy way is, and I know that that is what you're about to. And so the last thing about body image more specifically is I battled over a decade long eating disorder, which is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this topic in general and what I do overall. But for a long time before I walked in food freedom and image freedom, which I would say is still a journey in this culture, honestly, especially the body image part. But if you remember, were you ever in one of those old timey fun houses at the carnival? Do you know what I'm talking
Oh, yeah.
about? Yes. Okay. So I love to talk about those distorted mirrors that they were super fun. Like, you'd stand in front of them, do all the fun things. And 1 second, you were like a tall, lanky giraffe. And then, next you're like Oompa Loompa from Charlie's Chocolate Factory, right? And they were great fun and laughs, except for the fact that every mirror in my life was like that. And it was, something that's called body dysmorphia that's very real. And I believe that in today's filtered culture, that you don't have to have an eating disorder to have some of that and to have that perception issue. Because you asked me in the beginning, like, what do I say to people? And I think the bottom line is it is a perception issue and an identity issue, like I was talking about. So, you're going to respond based on who you believe that you are, but also how you see things. And if we go all the way back in Genesis to whenever Eve was offered the apple, she had seen that tree every day for as long as she had been in the garden. It wasn't a new tree. But what the enemy convinced her of was to see it differently. And that is what all these filtered images on social media and just in the media in general it is doing. And it affects us and it conditions us. And so therefore we see ourselves. And so it's like, it's asking God to reveal to us how he sees us, and then repeating that over and over, because the statistic I wanted to give you is that actually only 31% of Americans altogether, this is males, females, every age, have a healthy relationship with the mirror. 1 out of 10 avoid looking in the mirror altogether. That's astounding to me. The mirrors in the dressing room, like in places where wherever, they have like this curvature at the top and the bottom that makes us look taller and more slender. I mean, there's deception all around us. And so we can't take it at face value. It's like, know why we believe what we believe. And I like to say, treat your body the way that you want it to treat you, but also trust your body. Like I said a little bit ago, it knows what you need. It'll tell you when it's hungry, and you don't need all the crazy fad stuff that's out there. Yeah. And so I want to give like a gift to your people and to your audience. And I know that you steward and you love them so well through your amazing podcast that we all get to benefit from. But I wanted to just give a little gift. And so I designed this little body kindness journal, 7 days to a healthier relationship with your body. And it's going to feature like some daily prompts, some mindfulness exercises, actionable tips, and a resource list for other things that they can look at to help with better body image. And so, yeah. And then they can find me Instagram, Facebook, all the things under Lisa Michelle, and at lisamichellejones.com.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. This has been great information, and I will definitely put a link to that in the show notes so everyone can find you. And I appreciate you taking time to talk to us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I was thrilled to be here.
The information contained in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not considered to be a substitute for medical advice. You should continue to follow up with your physician or healthcare provider and take medication as prescribed. Though the information in this podcast is evidence based, new research may develop and recommendations may change.